So it is time to take a look at the Valvarn. Quite interested about the maximum DPS output on this thing. After all, we all know that the barrage implant does give you some very crazy short burst DPS. But let's take a look at the stats. Now, the Valvarn doesn't exactly have two weapon types, or should I say doesn't really have a bonus on two weapon types, but the Valvarn does get a bonus on shield boosters and armor repairs. Now, it's the question: should you use a armor or a shield tank? Well, I would say if you already have a Naglfar, if you're already used to shield, keep shield. But the armor tank can be useful for a armor fleet, which is a good thing. But for a solo tank, I would say shield still works better than armor, since you can literally recover the whole shield on this ship in 2 free cycles, which is kinda insane when you think about it. So I would still keep the Valvarn as a shield tank, but if you are part of a big fleet and if you're running armor, then a armor fleet would still work really well if you go with an armor tank on this ship. Now onto the build. 1750.86 is the current DPS value, and this is the build with the high angle autocannons. Although I will show you both the DPS outputs on the normal cannons and the barreled cannons, but this is about the build that is a replicate from the Revelation, a build focused on resistance. Now, let me find those normal old cans. I like the barreled cans because they have very good tracking and you can easily hit smaller targets with it. The normal capital cans are good for capital versus capital combat, or when you have a bunch of webs to basically slow down your enemy, and then you can use the normal cans. I remember when I flew the Naglfar, and I actually did fly most of the Dreadnoughts in PvP at this point in time. I wiped a couple of fleets with the Naglfar, which is very funny because it worked so well with the normal autocannons, with the normal capital autocannons. And that Dreadnought, when I returned it to the original owner, that Dreadnought got baited and destroyed. What happened a long time ago, but that's the fate of the Naglfar that I used to fly. Anyway, 3.2 thousand DPS. Now, Iron Hammer, Explosion, Annihilator. This is the Minmatar DoomsDay. It deals explosive damage, and here you can take a look at all of the stats. It has 150 kilometer range, which is very nice. Still has about the same electronic warfare capability as the previous DoomsDay device that we have looked at, and also does give you a turret damage effect, passive effect, plus 30%, and I think it also does give you tracking, missile torpedo damage, plus 30%, which is very interesting. Not really sure if that's new, or if that's only for this DoomsDay, but that's just what I noticed when I looked at it. Now there is this new module, the Longbow Fire Controller Information System. This basically enhances the parameters of your turrets, missiles, although it does reduce your armor and shield repair. I actually thought that this would reduce your resistance, but it doesn't. It does seem like I would see the polarization, but it's not exactly that. This reminds me on the on the siege mode button that we have in EVE Online. I would say that icon looks about the same. That's what this reminds me on, but it's very nice, a nice thing to have, and it will definitely give you a little bit of extra DPS. Well, 30% might not be a little bit, but it will still be nice to have. And the classic adaptive full-on resistance build works really well if you like to camp, works really well if you have a lot of logistic support to give you capacitor. And here is the integration setup. You can go wild on these ships. After all, they are Lancers, they're expensive, so you can go all out on the rigs. And as for the NL core, you have the Dragon Trend core, only one core available at the moment. It's not really necessary to have it, but If you want, then there's the option. I will run the ship without a nanocore because I usually do that when I'm testing them out. Now for the implants, you actually have three options, unless you don't plan to use the pulse crystal troll build, but you have the barrage implants and you have the artillery cover. As for the general units, depending on what you want, I guess you can set them up any way you like. You can do the same with the artillery cover implant, and you can do the same with the pulse crystal. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Finally, I actually can properly test out the super tank build with the pulse crystal on the Valvarn. We will see if it will work the way I imagined that it would work. And of course, down the road, I think after I finish with the next Dreadnought video, I will be doing the Dreadnought versus super capital stuff, just to see how tanky these things can get in actual combat. But first I want to do the ordinary Dreadnought stuff, because, you know, when the ships were originally released, I wasn't really able to do anything with them because the siege mode wasn't working. So yeah, had to actually wait for a while for the ships to be fixed. And in the typical fashion, I forget to refuel.
Docking request accepted.
So let me quickly go and grab some fuel for this thing. I always forget the fuel. And fun fact, I always use heavy water as fuel, because the plasmoids used to be bugged. I wasn't able to spawn them. But heavy water works, and I have plenty of it, so I am never going to be running out of fuel. That's for sure. Of course, when you refill your ship, use plasmoids. They're definitely, I would say, the best fuel source at the moment. Okay, now how much fuel can this thing eat up? Well, it can eat up a lot, that's for sure. I usually like to fill up the fuel tank and the cargo hold, just in case I decide to use the DoomsDay, or if I decide to use any of the new modules and stuff. You can actually refuel directly from the station. I just like to fill it up first, so I don't have to worry much about the fuel later on, depending on what I do. And let me just go put this in the cargo hold. It does hold a lot in the fuel tank and in the cargo hold, so that's nice. Let's unlock and let's test out the actual active stats of the Valvarn. Should be pretty decent. Wish we'd have a thermocirculation shield equivalent. Would be very fun if we did have something like that. Would make shield tankier for sure. Anyway, you can fire 2 DoomsDays, and if you refuel you can fire up to 4, so that's good. Now let me set everything up. Okay, that looks good. And let's stop the ship. So, with all the adaptives active, 9.2 million hit points, 88, 89, 91 and 87, not bad. Definitely could be theoretically higher if you have a different build and if you have a different general unit setup. With the siege mode up, you should get a lot more shield repair. With the C-type, you... well, 12,000 AP, okay, 81,000 shield recovered every 3.85 seconds, and 63,000 with the Republic Fleet shield booster, so yeah, it's pretty good. So roughly 160 to 250,000 depending on what module you have and depending on what general units you have equipped on the ship. With the module active, unfortunately the module does not want to be active, but it would give you extra 30% damage, and it would basically have the repair output on the boosters, which honestly is a decent trade. Would be fun to test this out on a full glass build, which will be interesting to see. 51,000 DPS with the barrage implant active, which is not bad. This is about a little bit less DPS than what was thrown at my revelation almost a year ago now. That failed to kill it. 12 to 16, 15 Naglifars, all glass, basically have been yeeted at my revelation, and they failed to kill it. It was pretty funny. Over 1.2 to 1.5 million DPS failed to kill it, which is kind of wild. But yeah, unfortunately the module doesn't work at the moment, and 44.8 million hit points is with the damage control active. Pretty nice for sure. Cannot complain about the resistances and tank on the ship. Should be really solid for a... I mean, it's a Valvarn, so it is expected. Now, what else can you do with this ship? If you are looking for a more conventional build, then the classic battery build will work. Actually, that battery build will probably be like the most popular build on a Valvarn. However, you can do the same build but armor tank. Again, the ship has a bonus on armor and shield boosters, so you can pick any of these two tanks to set up. I just say shield on the Minmatar Dreadnought is definitely much better than armor, unless of course you plan to fly with a armor fleet where you have armor link modules and all different stuff like that. In a armor fleet, the ship's tank would definitely be much better than a shield tank, that's for sure. Armor fleets are very nice nowadays, and if you want a more conventional battle build, it would look something like this. You should get some really good resistances, but at the same time you will also have some good capacitor stability, as well as some good armor, good shield repair. Now let's see how much resistance I can get out of this thing. 3 batteries, all look nice for sure. 2 boosters and a damage control. Damage control, you know, is there for emergencies. 6.5 million hit points, 84, 86, 87 and 80%, which honestly is not bad at all. You can definitely manipulate with the build a little bit, use 3 adaptives, 2 batteries, or even, you know, 2 batteries, adaptives and a damage control. You do have a lot of different options. It all depends on the situation that you're in. Now, let's do something different. I talked about the DPS and I talked about the barrage implant a lot in the past. You can do a lot of different builds with that, and I'll come to the DPS build in a moment, because I just remembered one thing. Remember when I was making the pulse crystal builds, and when I was slapping some weird stuff on the Revelation and the other Dreadnoughts? Well, time to do the same thing with the Valvarn. Basically, the trick is in the level 45 attribute of the pulse crystal, which means you do have permanent capacitor recovery. It replaces every single capacitor battery that you have. It does consume shield, but the trick is to out repair the 10% shield that's been eaten up by the implant. This works really well with ships that don't have a lot of shield, since you need to repair a lot of shield with ships with a lot of shield volume, and this does kind of apply for the Valvarn as well. So let's see if you can do this build on a Valvarn. Have to remember that this ship has about 40 to 50% more shield than the Naglfar and a lot more shield than the Revelation, so those 10% will be different for all the Dreadnoughts. The 10% on the Valvarn will be a lot more than the 10% on the Revelation, because of the difference in the overall total shield volume. But let's turn on the module and let's activate all the boosters. Now technically from the previous tests, 2 boosters should be 100% capacitor stability, 3 boosters around 80 to 70% capacitor stability. So you can run 3 boosters permanently and your capacitor will not feel a thing. In some rare occasions you can use all 4 boosters, and this basically recovers around 350 if you have all the C-type boosters, or B-type, A-type and so on. You might even recover up to 450 to 500,000 shield every single cycle, which is definitely more than enough to overcome the 10% shield usage for the implant. So yeah, this technically does work on the Valvarn, although other Dreadnoughts would take advantage of this much easier, especially the Revelation, the Bane, where the total capacitor volume is also larger and the total shield volume is also much less, so you need less boosters to overpower the repairs, while you can focus all the other remaining modules for extra tank. And this troll build works with a full-on brick tank. If you want a full-on brick tank, you can do that with the ship quite easily. With the Bane works as well. If you have this implant, since there is no need for batteries, you can just roll the build like this and it will work. The only problem would be if you get neutralized. A lot of neutralizers are the main problem with a build like this, since the neutralizers would slowly but surely eat away at your capacitor, and eventually you will run out of capacitor and shield. So yeah, that's basically the main enemy of this troll build, neutralizers. So if you do stumble upon a ship like this, remember to bring a lot of neutralizers to destroy the capacitor. So let's do, I think it's time for the DPS build. Now the DPS on this thing should be pretty wild. After all, we all know the barrage implant and how it works. We'll also show you the build with artillery cover, which has a lot more passive and stable DPS, but let's slap some good old gyro stabilizers, about 4 of them. And ironically, this actually would work really well for a hot drop build, for a hot drop, you know, surprise type of attack when you drop a Sino on a super capital or something. Something like this would work really well. I think you can do the same thing with the Hubris, with the thermocirculation or high power coil. You can do the same with the Moros, you can do the same with the classic Naglfar. And the difference is this has a DoomsDay, and the DoomsDay can definitely help you a lot. DoomsDay, on top of that, it has a lot of tank and has bonus on the extended and armor plates. You can do a armor plate build or a extended build, would work really well. I mean, you have a bonus, and this is one such example where you can use that bonus really well. That extra 50% with a general unit on top does give you a lot of shield, so you do have a very interesting passive tank when you build your ship in such a way. 4.4 million hit points and 1.2 million in shield. Definitely can be a lot higher. Now when it comes to the rigs, if you do plan to build a ship like this, you can leave one integration for basically more resistance. A 4P for all 4 damage types would be, you know, would be nice. But if you want full DPS, then you're looking for a triple burst build, because that works the best with 4 damage mods, in this case 4 gyro stabilizers, and this can be applied to every other Dreadnought that there is in the game at the moment. And basically not only Dreadnought, but every other ship does benefit from such a setup. Before the change on how everything worked, the 2 burst and 1 collision was the best, but now after the change, basically 3 burst is what you are looking for. Now the DPS will be lower, my apologies, the tank will be lower, but the DPS will be much higher. And let's unlock Now prepare yourself for what you're about to see, because let me tell you, the DPS looks insane. We are looking at super capital level of DPS. Although short, it is still nonetheless super capital level of DPS, and the fun fact is it's not even the highest possible damage output. So 4 million hit points, yeah, it could be better if I have one integration for resistance, but you know, it's still decent enough. Has a lot of shield, has a damage control. All you need. This is all you need. For now, of course, but you do have other options. If you don't like this build, you can always change, and if you do have a different idea, of course, you can use the different idea. I'm here to just give you ideas and to give you something that, you know, works. Let's test it out and what some of the best players I know are using. Now, since I forgot to switch to the barrage implant, let me quickly go and take the barrage implant. I was wondering why I did not have the icon there. It turns out I forgot to click on the implant. Happens. Let's undock and let's take a look at the active DPS on this thing. I mean, I already said it would be super capital level of DPS, but how much? Well, let's find out. So let's stop the ship with the without anything active, 6.7,000. With the barrage implant active, without the siege mode up, 26,000 DPS, which is already kind of scary when you think about it. With the siege mode up, it is 107,000 DPS. If I had the damage mode enabled, it would be an extra 30%, or actually, extra 15% damage. If I had the special module active, but with one gyro stabilizer, it's 132,000 hit points, DPS. 158,000 with the second one. With the third one, we're looking at 176,000 DPS, and with the fourth one, 185,000 DPS. If that extra module was able to work, we would have something around 200,000 DPS with the alt cannons. Not even C-type. If you had C-types, that's definitely well over 200,000 DPS. Maybe we're looking at 215, 220,000 DPS with everything active. And that is some very nice short burst damage. Bring like 15 or 20 of these ships together and you do get maybe 10 million DPS. It would be kind of funny to look at, actually. 10 million DPS, yeah. Maybe would be fun to check. I mean, maybe that's a potential new anti-super capital fleet. I don't know, just giving out ideas. And let's take a look at the artillery cover implant. 36,000 cold DPS without anything active in siege mode. Now the artillery cover implant is good when you want sustained DPS, and this will definitely be much more sustained than the barrage, that's for sure. It will do more damage than the barrage implant in the long run. 45,000 DPS, 54,000 DPS, and with the third one, 60,000 DPS, and with the last one, 63,000 DPS. And this is, by the way, actually in the long run, as I mentioned before, much more stable, and in the long run it will deal much more damage. But the barrage is good when you want something dead in a very short time frame. For longer battles, artillery cover definitely wins. So that was the Yeet PvP DPS build. And can you actually use this ship for PvE? Yes, you can. It's actually very interesting how good the ships can technically, in theory, be for PvE. I will be using that DoomsDay for PvE purpose today, and you will see what I'm talking about. It's actually quite interesting that it works the way that it works, because I personally did not expect it to work at all, but it does work. You can do the classic high angle builds with adaptives, batteries, and tracking computers, but if you're looking for something with more, let's say, something with more of a DPS output, and something like this will be fine. A minimal tank in this case. Not my favorite build, and I personally don't recommend that you fly such a ship with literally no tank. I was never a fan of like glass nullsec or lowsec PvE builds, mostly because such a ship is just a very big, fat, easy target for a fleet or for a hot drop. But you know, apparently it's very popular to run your ship like that, so this would be a build kind of inspired by that. But again, I would prefer the classic high angle build with tank over this any day of the year, because with extra tank you can actually fight off whatever jumps you. But with this build, if you get caught, you are basically dead. However, it does give you some good DPS, so yeah, I guess you sacrifice a bit of tank to gain a lot of DPS. If you're into that, well, that's fine. And I would use one thing that's still the same as with the classic high angle build is the fact that I keep using the barreled weapons just because they have extra tracking, and extra tracking is important, especially when you're doing PvE, since there are smaller ships and those smaller ships can be a problem, so you definitely want to eliminate that problem. And the barreled autocans seem to be doing the job just when they have good tracking. So the tracking is between large autocans and large artillery. Not better tracking than large autocans, but definitely better tracking than the large artillery, so it's somewhere in between, and that's fine. They do a lot of damage though, so that's important, and well, that's the build that we're looking for. Less DPS, but it should do the job just fine. So let's yeet the Valvarn at some laboratories and let's see what happens. Now, in the previous videos I didn't get the chance to use a DoomsDay on anything, but today that's different. I'll be firing the DoomsDay every chance that I get, and I'll be refueling the ship. Now, the DoomsDay itself does some interesting damage. It is able to clear a whole wave of enemy ships in PvE. It's surprisingly effective when it comes to clearing these ships, especially when they are all clumped in one spot. The trick is to find the ship that's in the center so that your beam can kill as many as you can possibly see. In the siege mode, you do get a bonus on the DoomsDay. It does increase your range and does increase your total damage output. The problem though is you will not be able to move once you fire it, so that's a big drawback if you are using this for PvE. You are quite literally forced to wait if you're using the DoomsDay. You cannot move. Kind of risky indeed, but it's definitely interesting to see this thing in action. And yeah, I basically cleared all the, well, most of the ships of the first wave without much of a problem. Bad part is it kills the wrecks as well. So not only you will be killing the ships, but you will be killing anything, wrecks, drones, fighters, whatever is in the line of sight, it will be killed. So keep that in mind. And while the DoomsDay is firing, you are unable to use your turrets, you are unable to use modules, so you have to wait until the DoomsDay does its thing. And once that is finished, you can actually fire the main guns. But at the moment I can't move, I can't warp, I can't cloak, I can't dock, I can't jump. So you are stuck here until the debuff effect is over, and honestly I'm kind of fine with that, since it should have a penalty of using the DoomsDay. It is after all a DoomsDay weapon, and as a DoomsDay weapon they are kind of meant to have a big drawback. It would be fun to test out the Titan Doomsday, and we all know Titans are coming. Titans are about 3-4 months away from this moment of time, so Titans are definitely not too far away now. Will be fun to test them out, and will be fun to fire the Doomsdays. And speaking of firing Doomsday, let's launch this thing again. Does look very nice. Every Doomsday has its own effect, and you can expect the same thing for the Titans as well. Every Titan will have its own Doomsday, hopefully with a unique effect. But yeah, ironically for PvE this actually works really well. This works really well for laboratory missions, since you can clear a whole wave just like that. Looks kinda nice though. I like the effect of the Doomsday. Still fun how the whole wave just disappears. So I can kinda see the appeal of using Doomsdays in PvE now, since it literally allows you to clear a whole wave. Okay, and speaking of clearing a whole wave, I think this might be the record time for me in clearing a laboratory mission. I spent maybe like 5 minutes. The longest thing that I waited for was the cooldown for the Doomsday, but basically I cleared a whole wave with one click. The lock-on time on the Lancer isn't really the best, but it gets the job done. And for the target I pick up a battleship, since the Lance needs a target to shoot at it, and it would be I think this one. Yeah, let's launch the Doomsday. 34 ships spawned. Let's see how many ships stay alive after Doomsday finishes yeeting them. Let's see. And Doomsday has been engaged. 30 ships, 23 ships, 20 ships, 15 ships. Well, okay. It killed like half of them, more than half of them. So yeah, that's enough. It killed half of them. If I did fire a bit to the lower part, I think I could have killed more, but you know, still was able to halve the whole fleet there. I would say that was actually kind of funny. A whole laboratory fleet wiped. Imagine if you have like, if you're multi-boxing 2 Lancers, you can clear a whole wave with a single click, which is kinda funny to think about. I would say that Titan Doomsday will have a wider beam, a much wider beam, and there's a chance that the Lancer Doomsday would be able to clear the whole thing, whole like wave in one click. Maybe the whole wave and the second wave, since if you kill the first wave, the second wave spawns. But with that being said, that would be the Valvarn. Honestly, decent ship, very interesting mechanics for the Doomsday there, and the overall performance is very nice. The build and overall tank on the ship is really decent. And with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, play safe, as always. I'll see you next time.